Hello Tech Pros, episode 97.
Clearly do something that you're passionate about and you're excited about the future of the area and start small with it. Don't go out and raise money and try and find investors in this idea. Go out and really start small.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Cassidy Lackey. Happy Saturday, Cassidy.
How's it going?
This is going great. Are you ready to hustle?
I'm ready to do it, man.
Let's do it. Cassidy Lackey started a mobile software company in 1997 focused on Palm Pilot and grew it to become a leading software company in the Trio BlackBerry days. He eventually sold that company and decided to focus on lifestyle internet businesses. This gives Cassidy the flexibility to spend time on the things that really matter. So, Cassidy, what happened to the Palm Pilot and BlackBerry, man?
Well, man, in a way, I kind of miss those days a little bit. You know, it was new and exciting, and it was hard to do, which is a great area to build a business in. You know, we like to solve problems that are hard. Once things get really easy, you get a huge amount of competition, and it changes things quite a bit. But those were the good old days, in my opinion.
The good old days. I remember when I upgraded to the BlackBerry. Remember the BlackBerry that had the little circle kind of thumb wheel right in the middle of the...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I had made it then. Like, wow, this is almost like a mouse. I can roll around on the screen. I can move my cursor. This is like the pinnacle of mobile software. This is amazing.
Yeah. You know, my most exciting time was like the Trio 650 days, you know, when somebody actually put the Palm Pilot together with a phone in a really good fashion, right? Because before that, it was just kind of like they were just kind of shoving two devices together, and it was a mess, never really worked well. But when that Trio kind of 600, 650 came out, man, they were finally kind of firing on all cylinders. It felt like now it seems archaic, but man, at the time it was quite cutting edge.
And you were like, hey, I could write some really, really killer software for this device and dominate the market.
Exactly, because at the time, there weren't many good connected apps. There were a few good, just apps for the device, for the Palm Pilot, but surfing the web was a complete nightmare because there were no websites that were that size, and it was slow, and so we built stuff that was kind of optimized for that screen size, but pulled the data down in a really thin format, and it worked really well at that time. We did really well with that type of stuff. So
that's awesome. So let's get into that story. So today is Entrepreneurship Saturday on Hello Tech Pros, and it's the day that we work. If we're in a 9-to-5, we work on our side projects or side hustles. Or we're starting our businesses, or we're trying to figure out how to learn from other entrepreneurs. So we want to learn from your story. So tell us about that time back in 1997 when you were like, I'm going to double down on this mobile stuff and I'm going to figure it out. And even though the landscape is kind of rough, I think there's a market here.
Sure, yeah. So, early it was like 1996, 1997, the Palm Pilots were coming out, and a lot of people were using these. And, it was the first kind of handheld device where you could really get an SDK and develop some software on it. And, I was a pretty recent graduate, computer science degree from Baylor University, and I was working full time at Sprint in computer science. And, I got the SDK and started playing with it, and it was pretty complex. It was pretty hard to do, and I figured out pretty quick that I'm much better at figuring out the business side of things in that world. I understand the technology, but there was much better developers. So I started partnering with some friends who were good developers, and we came up with a few ideas and started developing software for the Palm Pilot. And really, I just created a website and started selling it online. One of them was just a little generic database, and one of them was actually probably the first password security app for mobile devices ever. We developed that, and started selling it online and selling it through other websites. And of course, I was working a full-time job as well. So, and I was just recently newly married. So, my wife kind of lost me to, all this stuff I was doing at night that she didn't understand. And, over a number of years, it picked up, and, more people were buying the devices and more people were looking for software to install. And, it became a fairly serious business over 3 or 4 years as we developed, a handful of apps and did a little bit better, each year. And again, I love the idea of starting this stuff on the side and starting it small. It takes the pressure off, and was really investing all of the income of that into developing more apps, or even bought some other small apps or small companies that were doing similar stuff. And eventually, it got us to the point where another company was interested in acquiring us back in, I guess it was about 2000.
Awesome. So you said that you were much more comfortable on the business side than on the technology programming side. So I want to definitely focus on the business side. But first, let's touch a little bit on the technology. So in today's world, you've got native Objective-C and Swift on the Apple, the iOS side, Java programming for the Android side, .NET on the if anybody out there has got a Windows phone. And then there's all the web hybrid, right? Mono and Xamarin and things like that to do cross-platform, as well as just HTML5 development. So what was the development landscape like back in the Trio Palm Pilot days?
Well, it was mostly C, and I had done some of that before. I hadn't done a lot of C, and I found it for myself a little bit complex, just because of all of the memory management that was having to go on that device. It was clearly very little memory on those things, in the small number of megabytes. So you have to really be careful about the memory management and stuff like that. And that's where I kind of realized that there's other guys that are better at that type of thing. And what's interesting is when that first came out, the SDK first came out, it was on Mac OS only, and Mac wasn't huge back then, so I didn't even have a Mac. Everything was Windows, and I was trying to figure out, do I really go buy a Mac just so I can work on this thing? So I actually waited from 1996 through, I think it was 97, when they finally came out with the Windows version of the SDK and all that stuff to work on before I jumped into it. But yeah, it was pretty complex for my taste, but I knew there was a big opportunity, and I like working. I always partner with really smart technologists, and they like working with me because I understand it enough to talk it and to understand what they're talking about. But I really know how to make money working with these guys and build businesses based on what these guys can do now.
So let's talk about that aspect of it. So you partner with different developers to help you build the applications itself. The databases, the first password security application on the mobile devices, and then well, this was before, right? There were mobile app stores, right? There was no Apple store. There was no Google Play store. So how did you find or build a market to sell these applications?
Sure. So there actually were a couple stores, believe it or not. I was selling directly online with a credit card. Having to use a credit card. An interesting story about that is this was before many people were using credit card systems online. So in order to get a merchant account, they actually had to come out. They were supposed to come out and take a picture of your business. Well, I was one of the first guys that was doing that. So they actually sent a guy out to my house to take a picture of my computer sitting on a desk, because they had to have a hard picture of your business before they would give you a merchant account. So that's how early that was. But there were actually a couple stores. There was a store called Palm Gear, and I think there was another one that was starting up called Handango. That is both those, interestingly, were right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex that I'm in. And so I got to know those guys and started selling our apps through them, and started selling it through our own website. And very early days, but it was working well enough to generate. At some point it was generating $20,000 or $30,000 a month in sales, which seems pretty crazy for back then when there weren't many people using the devices. So
Yeah. So what was the market like? Like how many users were out there? And then, kind of what price points were you setting the applications at back in the day?
So in those days, my apps were like probably 10 or 15, maybe $20, which seems like a lot now.
Yeah.
They were all kind of early adopter type of people. So the nice thing about the early adopters on these devices is that they like to buy a lot of software, right? They're people who get out there and dig around, and they'll search for stuff quite a bit and find that there are apps out there, and they'll tell their friends about it, and they'll just like early adopters on smartphones did too.
Hmm.
But there's not. Of course, there's high margin in this software business. So once you develop it, it can be pretty lucrative if you're just selling the same stuff over and over again and keep improving it. Um, so it was a good profitable business to do on the side, especially, right? Which is what I like to do, is find stuff that makes good money while you're sleeping, essentially. So.
Right. And you were working at Sprint at the same time. So did you, once this business kind of kicked off, did you leave your full-time job or did you stick with it for a while?
Yeah, so I worked at Sprint for a while, and then I went to work for a company called Level 3 Communications in Colorado as well.
Yep.
And so about 3 or 4 years into that, I got a call from a guy in Kansas City who was they were kind of retail software guys that had been through the whole kind of PC software days, and they were starting up a new business. They saw that there was kind of a similar transition that was happening. It was kind of a bunch of hobbyists who were developing software, and these guys were really good at the retail market. So they actually called me up, and I was still working full time, and it was getting hard to manage the full time job and the full time business essentially. And we were getting ready to have our first child, so it kind of made sense to partner with them. So they called and came out and visited, and I really liked Augie Grasses, the guy who started that business, and really smart, honest guys that understood the retail space, which I kind of thought was the next big thing at the time. How was I going to get beyond just what I was doing then? And we were also starting to get to the point where there was Windows CE was coming out, and all of these new things that I wasn't quite sure how I was going to tackle it just on my own. So ultimately, we made a deal where they acquired my company just in exchange for stock in their company, and gave me a full-time job, and I led their technology and had a lot more resources, and I was able to build a team a little bit and that type of thing. And then from there it kind of took off, right? Because we had the funding and whatnot to get into retail. And the nice thing back then is all the devices were purchased in retail. So when you would go into retail, into Best Buy or CompUSA or all these computer stores or Staples or any of these, you would buy your Palm Pilot, and then you'd pick up an accessory or two at the same time, and then you'd also pick up a piece of software along with it. And that gave us, getting into that market and being kind of the main retail guy for that area, gave us the ability to go out and get some real brands. So we went out and we actually had the Monopoly and Scrabble and Tetris and Battleship and Yahtzee before EA or any of these guys were doing mobile. We were doing all that stuff and building those games, and believe it or not, we were selling them for $20 or $30 per game in those days too. So you can imagine it was a pretty lucrative business.
Well, I have to take credit for giving you about $20 because I know that I bought Tetris back in the day
Yeah.
on one of those early Blackberries.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and Tetris was actually one of my deals I did before I was acquired. So that was interesting because I got really good at meeting, kind of young, really smart developers, and I had acquired a clone of Tetris that was really good out there, and somebody else, another company that we worked with quite a bit, came out and they acquired the license from Tetris because it was a completely separate company called the Tetris Company back then, and they said, hey, if I just develop the app for it, then they'll give me a percentage of all the sales. So I ended up finding this guy and asking him to paying him a few $1,000s. It was really some kid in the UK to make it into the official Tetris by following these certain guidelines, and then we kind of moved it over to the real Tetris, and I ended up making a percentage of that for quite some time of every Tetris game that was sold for the Palm OS. So it was interesting.
Interesting. So you found a knockoff copy of Tetris that wasn't the official license thing, but it was kind of open source, or somebody had already developed it. And then once you started working with the licensors on the official product, then you just hired a developer to take their IP or their branding and apply it to kind of the clone knockoff copy of Tetris and turn it into the real deal.
Exactly. We did the same thing for Scrabble as well. There was a great Scrabble clone out there, and we acquired it, and I think we paid somebody else to turn it into the real version, and we got the licensing, which is really the hardest part of it all, is the working with EA or back then Hasbro and these companies to get the real license, and you got to be a certain size, and you got to make sure you can invest. They want to see that you're going to invest into retail a certain amount, which is could be six figures investment to get into all that stuff. And once you have all that, then the technology was pretty easy. But we made a lot of money, and we were able to use those brands to generate a lot of revenue, where we invested in future stuff that we knew was coming up, more of the wireless type of stuff.
So through this peak of early mobile devices and a lot of software with a premium price tag, $10-$20 per install. Eventually, you sold off this business and you decided to move into a lifestyle internet businesses. So tell us, what was the rationale behind that, and what is a lifestyle internet business?
Sure. So yeah, it was kind of a long process through all that. As you can imagine, we were the leaders in Trio and BlackBerry, and did really well with developing some really innovative technologies on the wireless side of things, and got it actually bundled on a lot of Trio devices that came out of Sprint. And I learned a lot through all that. And then, when the iPhone came out, it kind of changed everything. We went from, a dozen software competitors to, 1,000 software competitors, because every 18-year-old was now an iPhone developer. And, we looked like an old record company, basically. So we had to transition, and we ended up doing that transition and got more into the mobile advertising, became a leader there, and ended up selling. Ironically, we ended up selling it to Sprint a few years later. But I was seeing at the time that it was kind of becoming the size that I wasn't really excited about working for a company. We were at about 180 people or whatever at the time, and it was just challenging. I was ready to do something different. It had been I'd been 13 years in that industry at that point. So I started kind of looking at, what else did I want to do with my life, and started looking at other opportunities around there. And I learned a lot in those Handmark software days about what I like to do and what I don't like to do, and the type of business I want to create. And, I kind of liked the idea of a lifestyle business where I didn't have to go raise funds and become an employee basically of the investors, that I could control the company and decide how big I wanted to make it, and decide how much I wanted to work and how much I wanted to make from it. And so I went out and started looking at other opportunities, and found a few over time that generate a good lifestyle income for me, allow me to spend as much time working as I want to, and they pay my bills. But I don't feel like I'm obligated to work 40 hours or 60 hours or 80 hours a week on it if I don't want to. So, we'll never build $1 billion business out of it, but I've kind of just decided that's fine with me. As long as it pays my bills and I'm doing what I want, then that's all I really need.
Awesome. So tell us the specifics. What kind of businesses are you in the lifestyle internet business front?
So, I've done a lot of different things. The two that have kind of worked out the best for me is, I started looking for lake houses in the Texas area at one point, and Googling all the different lakes around here to try and find out what I like about different lakes, and without having to drive out to each one. And just found out, and this was probably 8 or 10 years ago, figured out that there wasn't a lot of good information online about it. Other than real estate websites, and sometimes the Chamber of Commerce might have a decent website. Sometimes it's terrible. So I started going out and buying those domains for the best lakes around Texas and Oklahoma. And they're not cheap. They were, sometimes they're well into the 5 figures. But I realized that I could partner with another good developer that I knew, and we developed kind of a content management system that allowed us to build um, kind of portals or travel websites for each of these lakes. So we became the best website with the most information for each of these lakes, and it allowed us to sell listings for vacation rentals and for real estate listings and marinas, and basically anything out there where anybody is Googling Lake Texoma something, they can find that. They'll find that information on our website. And it was nice for me because I kind of became an expert in search engine optimization and the marketing through social media and things like that. And a lot of the people out there in those kind of rural areas really aren't very good at that stuff. So it wasn't really hard to kind of become the leader in some of those lakes. And again, they don't generate a ton of money, but you add up 10 or 15 of them, and it becomes enough to kind of pay your bills and not have to spend a lot of time on it, because it's all recurring advertising revenue that you've set up in a very simple way for people to get in there and add their own listing and put in their credit card and come back and adjust it if they have anything. So I don't have to spend a lot of time on the phone or answering email questions or anything like that.
Okay, so when you said you went out and bought domain names for different lakes, like Lake Texoma or one of the other lakes, this wasn't just going to GoDaddy and saying, "Oh, it's available for $9.95, I'll buy it." These were already established websites that other people had bought the domains, they owned the domains, they owned some content on those. So what was the process like of acquiring a domain name for a particular lake and then transitioning over to your brand, your content, your technology?
Well, some of them were already websites that were already going, and they just weren't doing very well, or weren't. I knew I could do a lot better. I could generate a lot more revenue out of that domain. Or they were, some of them were just domain squatters who had been on it for 15 years, right?
Wow.
So the prices weren't cheap, right? Because they knew that those were valuable domains. But if I knew I could monetize it better than anybody else, because I kind of tried it for a few years and figured out it was working. I started very cheap, right? The first domain I bought was a couple $1,000s, and I was partnering with a developer who's my partner in this thing, so it wasn't costing me anything to develop the platform, because he trusted me, and he had been with me for a long time and realized we could generate some revenue on this together, some good passive income. So we went out and we bought a couple low price domains and started testing it, and after a few years we realized, we actually can build a business off this. So we weren't spending, we were saving that money in order to invest in more domains and bigger domains, and we were able to buy stuff that were kind of into the 5-figure domains, and it just takes a lot of time, right, to get those search engine rankings and get more content. I'm paying, I pay editors to write stories, local stories in the area, and I, the real estate listings are not directly from MLS. They're actually, put in by the real estate agents, so they end up as unique content, and eventually it ends up being a website with, thousands of pages of unique content that's very valuable in the search engines and very valuable to the community.
Cool. So through this process, you acquired the domain. If it was a squatter, there was no content out there, so you had to build it. And so it sounds like you were taking the small profits or the small revenue or cash flow from the initial investments, from the initial websites, and just reinvesting that over and over into acquiring another one, now hiring more writers, now doing more SEO work, and slowly build this empire, as opposed to, like you said before, going out to another like a big investor or something like that had a lot of capital, where you could do all the domain names like in a year or within 6 months or 2 years or something like that. You really took your time to build it up slowly.
Exactly. And I'm glad I did it that way, because if I would have, I could have easily put together a spreadsheet that says I was going to make this much per lake times 100 lakes or 1,000 lakes. And, the reality is that would have never happened, because as I'm learning it, I'm realizing there's challenges to every lake. Some lakes already have a lot of competition out there. There's already a really good Chamber of Commerce website that does the content really well. Or, there's some lakes are small enough that they don't have any competition. It's the competition that really drives advertising. So, if there's one marina and one fishing guide and one real estate agent, none of them are going to pay for advertising because they're the only ones out there. There's no reason to. So, it's taken me a while. We bought a lot of domains that didn't really pay off all that well. But, now that I understand that, and I didn't have to go out and get that debt or investment. I'm in a lot better situation. Even though it took 10 years to build it, it's a great business for me that generates good cash flow, and it doesn't require a whole lot of effort anymore.
Well, Cassidy, we want to help our listeners get a big payoff in their investments. So here on Hello Tech Pros, it's all about helping the audience learn how to build their career, build their product, and build their business. And so this is a great conversation I think we've got going on here on how to build an awesome product and how to build an awesome business. So when we get back from our break in just a moment, I want to ask you about what we can do to turn our passion and our hobbies into a successful business, whether that be, the lifestyle industry that you're in now, or maybe more corporate stuff that you were doing before. But first, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by Burdine. Siri and OK Google are fun for party tricks, but 97% of smartphone users don't like talking to their phones in public. It's kinda weird. When was the last time you were at the mall and heard someone say, "Siri, what's my wife's dress size?" Or, "OK Google, where did I park my car?" Some things are better left unspoken. Burdine remembers the things you care about and reminds you discreetly through text messages. Names, dates, places, ideas, to-do lists. Burdine never forgets and is always there to remind you. You don't need to install an app, just text Burdine a statement and she'll remember. Text her a question and she'll answer. Burdine is the only contact you have to have on your phone. Meet Burdine at burdine.com. That's BURDENE.com. Or text Burdine to 480-418-1411. Outside the U.S., be sure to use the country code +1. So for non-U.S. residents, text +1 480-418-1411 with a message Burdine. Okay, we're back with Cassidy Lackey. We've been talking to Cassidy about how he started a mobile development company back in the 1997 era with the Palm Pilots and the Blackberries, and grew that from just a couple of applications into a very large corporation with several hundred employees, and was selling big name titles like Monopoly and Tetris, both on the early mobile app stores on the internet as well as in retail stores. And then how, as that grew, Cassidy decided to move out of that space and really start a lifestyle business. And so over the course of several years, he acquired many domain names for all the different lakes and the big lakes in Texas and Oklahoma and surrounding areas, and worked on search engine optimization and getting a lot of good content out there so that he could provide advertising for those websites, and then build a passive income stream for that. So Cassidy, you've had a couple of different types of businesses that you've run, businesses that you've built. So as we are thinking about what kind of business that we want to build before we're tackling, okay, how are we going to make money off of it? How would you, what would you say to someone as far as picking the style of business that works for them, right? So you've got the more corporate side where you're building a business and having employees and maybe getting into retail. And then on the other side, you've got your lifestyle business, which is pretty much just, it takes care of your rent and your, putting food on the table for the kids and all that kind of stuff. So how can a person make a decision on which side is really a best fit for their personality?
Sure. So, for me personally, I've really liked to focus on kind of the passive income, because to me that's ultimate freedom, right? If I can find a way to build a service that charges even just $25 a month for ads on some of these smaller websites, that builds over time to the point where I don't have to be trading my hours for dollars. Because once you're doing that, you're kind of stuck to where you have to work a certain number of hours in order to make ends meet. Now, it may start off like that. I mean, I didn't make any money on this lake business for the first 4 or 5 years because it was a lot of just working my real job and working on this at night, to see what would work, trying things out, and even going out to the lakes on the weekends to talk to people and get to know them and understand what the challenges are. And, even providing some stuff for free. Starting off, you're not going to get any advertisers on a site that doesn't have any traffic, but, I would put free ads out there in order to to make it look like something's going on and start generating some traffic to some of these guys. And then a few years down the road, then you flip the switch and say, we got to start charging something for it. So, I would go out and get to know people and find out what the problems are. And, if you have to start in a situation where you're trading dollars for hours as some type of service, then that's what you do. But you always have your mind on, how can I turn this into some type of service or some type of passive income where it can be running even if I take a vacation or don't worry about it for a few weeks. It'll still make money for me. And for me, that's created a freedom to where I can go out and decide what to do with that other time, whether it's spending more time with my family or working on, I'm kind of interested in urban farming and that type of thing, doing some of that stuff for fun, or looking at your next business. The nice thing about having passive income is it allows you to spend time on other types of businesses that you might be interested in working on as well. So that's led to other businesses that I've invested in or becoming involved in that in turn generate more passive income for me.
So a lot of service-based businesses that we talk about require somebody actually doing work, talking to clients, talking to customers, setting things up, how can we take an idea and really turn it into a passive service type business?
Well, if you can build an audience, so, to me, that's the key to building a good passive income business. So, I also own, I haven't talked about it, but I also own, the network of the top drone enthusiast forums for drone enthusiasts. So, the way we got into that was kind of backwards through my nephew, who was building great little accessories for drones. He was a 15-year-old kid using a 3D printer to build accessories and selling them online. And, I kept telling him that's a really cool business, but you're having to stay up all night printing these things out and shaving them down and packaging them and shipping them. And, at some point somebody's going to figure this out and do it all in China and undercut you by a ton. So let's figure out how to own that audience where everybody's coming, and then you're just selling ads to all these other people who are doing this work. And we ended up buying, my brother and I ended up buying this network of forums, and it's been a great business for us because we own that audience. I mean, we own 350,000 unique visitors a month who are all drone enthusiasts. There's no way anybody else is going to find that audience. If you were selling accessories, you'll never be able to get in front of that many people. So that opens up a whole set of opportunities that we can advertise, sell advertising. We could run our own store through it. We could create our own accessories and stuff if we wanted to. But there's a dozen different ways that we could generate revenue once we own that audience. So figure out your business and what you're doing, and even do the service part of it. But if you can build an audience up, then ultimately you have a lot more flexibility on how you can generate revenue through that audience.
So, clear transparency, full transparency here. That's what we're doing here with Hello Tech Pros, is building an audience of technical professionals who want to learn how to, improve and build their career, build their products, and build their business. And we're providing expert interviews with folks like yourself who are adding value to the listeners for free and saying, hey, here's how I built my business, or here's how I was successful in my career. Here's the things that got me motivated. Here are the things that have kept me productive or taught me how to be a great leader. or in your case, here's the entrepreneurial spirit kind of tactics and strategies that I've used to build multiple businesses now over the last several years. And this podcast is very, very early, but I see it grow. It's definitely growing right now. It's growing over time, and the more conversations I can have with professionals like yourself who can add value to the audience, then the bigger the audience is going to get, because the more value they're going to get out of it. But then also they're going to come back to you. The audience is going to add value back to my guests, because they're going to reach out to you, Cassidy, and say, hey, I want to be like a business partner on your next venture because, I am a great developer, or I know how to administrate servers, or I've got some really cool domains that I own, but I don't know how to build an audience around them. Right. And so, that's my plan, man. I'm right there with you.
That's great. That's the way to do it.
Cool. So, man, I would love to talk about this kind of stuff forever, because, anybody that knows me knows that this is what I'm fired up about, is about connecting with the audience and really understanding what their pain points are, what their passions are, so that we can help them solve the problems and help them find success. So, Cassidy, before we go, do you think you could sum this up with maybe some final words of wisdom for the audience, and then maybe the best way that we can connect with you online?
Sure. Again, for me, it's all about trying to find a way to make that passive income with your business. Clearly do something that you're passionate about and you're excited about the future of the area, and start small with it. Don't go out and raise money and try and find investors in this idea. Go out and really start small, and then, just start trying things. Partner with somebody to build a small recurring income stream, a technology to allow you to charge, $5 a month or $10 a month for something. And, it doesn't take a whole lot of users at $5 or $10 or $25 a month to pay your rent. And if you can get to that point, then it opens you up, and you can start spending time on other things you want to do, or other businesses, or, figuring out how to grow that business. But if you get so tied down in the weeds of the business that you're spending all day just keeping it going, it's hard to find other opportunities. It's hard to be able to spend time on other opportunities if those come up. And I'm available to answer questions or whatever if you guys have them. The best way probably I'm not spending a lot of time on my own Twitter and blog these days, but if you connect with me on LinkedIn, that's probably the easiest way to get my connections and ask questions and things like that.
So do you want to give a shout out to any of your web properties so that folks can take a look at your websites?
Sure. My best lake websites are laketexoma.com and cedarcreeklake.com. And you'll notice there's links down at the bottom of each of those to my other lakes. You'll notice they all kind of look the same, but they have different content and different advertisers. And then my drone forums, the best one is phantompilots.com. That's all about the DJI Phantom. It's the top Phantom drone forum out there. So if you take a look at that, you'll see that, I don't have to spend a huge amount of time in there other than working on the technology and adding features and add-ons and making sure stuff is working well, because we have great moderators and people, and of course the community. The beautiful thing about the forums is the community creates the content for you, so you don't have to be creating content around it.
Awesome. Great stuff. Cassidy, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value your insight and appreciate you taking time out of your busy Saturday to spend time with us and share your origin stories and your great tips there on how to build a great business.
No problem. It was enjoyable.
Awesome. Tech Pros, remember, like Cassidy said, you don't have to build $1 billion business. You don't have to get $5 million worth of venture capital seed money to start your business. You can start small. It doesn't take that many customers at $10, at $25 a month to pay your rent. And then once you can get that rent paid and get that minimum viable income going, then you can spend your time really building that business up and building other things as well. You've been listening to Cassidy, Lackey, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/97. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Entrepreneurship Saturday, but tomorrow my featured guest and I will not be talking about work because it's Sunday being unplugged. On Monday, we'll get motivated once again to face the week with Motivation Monday, followed by Tuesday, productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people communication, and Saturday, back to our entrepreneurship. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.